Hello, hello.
So we just got Bill.
Ha
And
ha
did
ha,
you
you
see
are
what
in. I
Bill
love
just
that.
signed
How
a
are you,
second ago?
Bill?
I'm good. How are you?
All right, this is my Zoom,
Perfect.
which
And will
I've
you be able
set
to
to
record on
record. Yeah, I
Yes.
already set it to record into the cloud.
Okay, great. And then you'll send me the file.
Yes.
File.
The interview is only supposed to be like a half hour.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. You have plenty of time. I've set it up until 12 o'clock.
See what happens. Just letting it do its thing.
Up there you are admitting.
All
Okay,
right.
I'm.
Yeah, let's see. Can you hear me now?
I can hear everybody.
Oh, we're so awesome. I'm going to hang up on the phone. Bill, I'm so glad to be with you. I'm so excited to
Absolutely.
interview you, and I'll just count down that we're starting. So,
Okay.
3, 2, 1. I'm here on Talk of the Bay with Bill McKibben. He has a brand new book out called Here Comes the Sun, A Last Chance for the Climate and a Fresh Chance for Civilization, a provocative title from an author who has relentlessly pushed the idea that we can deal with the climate crisis if we act soon. Bill, what's different about this book than your previous book? Seems to be a little bit more optimism, but also increased urgency. How do you balance those two things in this book?
Well, you're definitely right. We live at a very fraught moment. The things that I've been warning about since I wrote the first book about climate change, what we then called the greenhouse effect back in the 1980s, those things are coming true. And they're coming true with flood and fire and disaster of all kinds at precisely the moment that our democracy is under enormous threat. And part of that has been an assault on clean energy. So there's a lot of big bad things happening, I think, on our planet and in our country. But the big good thing that's happening, and it's really flying under the radar some, is this super rapid spread of energy from the sun. The last 36 months or so have been just unlike anything that's ever come before. This is not only the fastest growing energy source on the planet, it's the fastest growing energy source in the history of the planet. And it's starting in the places that are taking it really seriously to transform the human relationship with energy. Uh, California is obviously one example. Most days now, California supplies 100% of the electricity that it uses from renewable sources for long sections of the day. At night, California supplies, often its biggest supplier from the grid is now batteries that have been soaking up excess sunshine all afternoon. And as a result, California, fourth largest economy on earth, is using about 40% less natural gas to make electricity than it was 2 years ago. That's the kind of change that if we manage to spread it around the world quickly, that would knock tenths of a degree off how hot this planet's eventually going to get. It's the single most encouraging statistic I've come across in almost 40 years of doing this work.
That's wonderful. I was left with so many questions. I'll try to get to them all. But one big one, of course, is can the current politics of our country, one of the biggest polluters of carbon into the atmosphere, can politics stop this market force that seems to be making it cheaper and cheaper?
It can't stop the market force, but it may be able to use politics to get in the way enough to really slow things down in the US. You know, the federal government is now just doing one, I think, insanely stupid thing after another. For instance, they've put federal lands off limits for solar and wind, but full speed ahead with coal and gas and oil. They're now adding new subsidies to coal in this country. They're trying to kill off the electric vehicle progress that we've started to make under President Biden, on and on and on. This can slow things down here at a crucial time, but it is worth remembering that the US is at this point only about 11% of the emissions on the planet. They can't slow down what's happening in the rest of the world. In fact, I think that all of Trump's uh, talk of energy dominance and how the US is going to be in charge, I think that's scaring lots of other countries into moving even more quickly on renewable energy. I don't think there's many people who want to depend on a increasingly fickle and erratic US for their supplies of energy. So people are turning instead to China and to their mastery of this new technology.
Well, I was very encouraged to read about balcony solar. This is like the most disseminated form of energy that people are literally putting little solar cells on their apartment balconies all over the world
This
because
is
it's cheaper, right?
exactly. This has happened full scale in Europe in the last 2 years. There's now millions, several million Germans who have gone to whatever the German Best Buy is and come home with a solar panel for a few €100 that is designed to be hung from the railing of your veranda and plugged straight into the wall. In many cases, they're producing 20% of the energy that they use. That's illegal everywhere in this country, except as of 2 months ago, in that progressive bastion, Utah, where the state legislature passed enabling legislation by a unanimous vote because some libertarian minded state senator stood up and said, why can the people of Hamburg and Frankfurt access this new miracle, but not the people of Provo and Salt Lake City? So now, if you go on YouTube, you can find lots of videos of people building, doing just this kind of work in Utah. And hopefully, we can get that to spread. That's one of the modest goals of this Sun Day. National Day of Action that we have coming up on September 21st, the fall equinox, that people can find out what's happening in their community at sunday.earth.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And we're going to do an interview about the local organizing for that
Nice.
here in Monterey Bay area. I wanted to address one thing that's always confused me and maybe confused our listeners as well, which is we hear a lot about the percentage of solar versus, petro energy. But isn't it also important to bring down the total output of energy in general of petro to get up with our goals? So it's
Yes.
not just a percentage. If you have, Bitcoin and Chat GPT eating up massive amounts of use, you haven't really brought down the total. So can you
Yes,
talk
that's
about the
what,
difference between percentage and total?
yes. And it's a very good point, but that's why that number that I gave you from California is so astonishing. Using 40% less natural gas to generate electricity than 2 years ago. And we can see the same thing starting to happen in other places around the world. The story that really blew my mind was what was happening in Pakistan, right next to China, and so easy to get cheap Chinese solar panels across the border. Last year, individual Pakistanis, and you can go on Google Earth and look yourself, have transformed the power grid in that country by putting solar panels on every flat surface in Lahore and Karachi and Islamabad. Uh, they built the equivalent of half the country's national electric grid in about 8 months. The earliest adopters and most fervent adopters were farmers who wanted to replace the diesel that they were using to run the pumps that allowed them to irrigate. That diesel was often their biggest cost input. So they started buying these cheap solar panels. They often lack the money to build the steel supports that we see so commonly. Instead, they were just laying them on the ground and pointing them at the sun. But Pakistan last year used 35% less diesel than they did the year before. We should definitely be trying to be efficient with energy. And one of the good things about the move to electric, to EVs, to heat pumps instead of furnaces, that kind of thing, is that they use a lot less energy because they're using it much more efficiently. They don't produce the same kind of waste heat that is what happens to most of the fuel that you burn in the tank of your car.
And does the extreme heat, which you mentioned Pakistan is one of the hottest places, is heating
Mhm.
up the fastest, does extreme heat impact solar panels efficiency?
Not very much.
Okay, good to
Uh,
know.
yeah. Um,
Yeah. And so we're in kind of the context you said at the beginning is this is really good news. I felt like in a way I was on the Giant Dipper roller coaster, going up and down as I read your book, but on the good news, on the bad news.
Yes.
But the good news is that if this does speed up like it is, we could seriously have a decentralized system that didn't skew our politics toward the big oil interests, which really, got my heart racing because it
Well,
gave me a sense of hope that we could have this. And then there's the other side, which is climate change is proceeding without much abatement still. And there's these tipping points staring us in the face. So we're kind of in this existential race. And
yes.
you say we can't just wait for market forces to get us there. So
No,
talk
we have
more
to.
about that context piece.
I sure will. So let's talk about the climate part first. We have to speed up here, go even faster than this transition is, which is currently mostly being driven by economics. We need it also to be driven by political concern because climate change is happening so fast. You all are well aware of just how fast that's happening, because you can see the results in California all the time. But the most systemic, uses around the world, the most systemic systems around the world are really starting to falter in dangerous and scary ways. The way that the jet stream works, the way that the Gulf Stream works, these are now eroding in real time. So we have to move fast. But if we move fast, we not only help ameliorate some of global warming, not stop it, much too late for that, maybe cut some tenths of a degree off how hot the planet gets. Not only do we get that benefit, and not only do we get big reductions in pollution, because 9 million human beings, one death in 5, comes from breathing the combustion byproducts of fossil fuel, but we also get this other thing that you were alluding to, which is this geopolitical bonus. Think about how different the geopolitics of the world over the last 70 years would have been if oil was inconsequential. Think about how many fewer wars and coups and on we would have had to be engaged in if we ran the planet on a resource that's available to everybody, everywhere, all the time. Human beings are good at figuring out reasons to fight wars, but even human beings are going to struggle to figure out how to fight one over sunshine.
I like that it's something available to people who don't have a lot of money, and that we can speed this up with the right policies. Is it possible that this could all happen without the United States for the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, it's possible that the U.S. could, I mean, the U.S. The U.S. could be one possible outcome here is that 15 years from now, the U.S. will be a museum where people from around the world travel to gawk at how people lived in the olden days, um, a kind of colonial Williamsburg of the internal combustion era.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
what a way to think of it.
yeah, I hope that doesn't happen. I think in the very short run, with Washington in the hands of the oil industry for the moment, the US is going to be doing everything it can to slow down this transition. But I think globally, that may have the odd effect of actually speeding it up some. Ask yourself, Donald Trump has talked a lot about energy dominance and how he wants all the other countries in the world depending on the US for their supply of oil and natural gas. If you're the ruler of some Asian country, you look around and you ask yourself, do I really want to depend on the supply of something as important as energy on the fickle and erratic government of the United States? Indonesia announced last week plans to build out 100 gigawatts of solar power by 2030, which would leave it second only to China, I think, in the scale of their commitment. That's the kind of thing that I think we'll see more and more and more of, especially as all the other technologies that make use of that electricity spread around the world. We're used to thinking that cars come from Detroit, but at the moment, the biggest builders of cars in the world and the biggest exporters are going to be in China because they're producing EVs at very low cost that have extraordinary performance characteristics. And everybody across the developing world is suddenly buying them if they're buying cars at all, because they're better and cheaper. And
Right. I think a lot of us would buy one if we could. They say they were $10,000,
yeah,
right, for an electric vehicle.
absolutely, absolutely. And so if you're, I mean, if we'd buy them if we could, think about if you're an Ethiopian or a Brazilian or whatever, that's what's happening. And and that means that the demand for oil 5 years out is going to be much smaller than people had been assuming even a few years ago. Half the cars sold in China last month came with a plug hanging out the back. Those are cars that are not ever going to be buying oil, you know?
Yeah, I want to talk about the difference between giant solar farms that you see, in the California desert
Yeah.
and home systems, and whether you think both of those are part of the solution you're describing, or whether these giant solar farms also concentrate power literally in the hands of a few.
No, we need both. And California's done a better job with the giant solar farms than with the rooftop ones. Governor Newsom's done a couple of dumb things about rooftop solar in the last few years, um, and which is too bad because we need both. You can get a lot of power out of the Mojave from those big solar farms, and that's good because California uses a lot of power. But the power from people's rooftops is particularly valuable, in part because we now know how to sort of string it together. Um, California ran a test a couple of weeks ago of what they're calling virtual power plant. And they hooked together 100,000 batteries in people's homes across California and dispatched that power to the grid and found that it was the equivalent of having a pretty big power plant come suddenly online. That's remarkably useful power because it's not like everybody's home is suddenly going to, have some maintenance outage or something the way that power plants do. In fact, when we get to the point in this country that we run our whole vehicle fleet on EVs, the batteries of those electric vehicles will be enough, provide enough power to run the entire country for about 2 days by themselves. So the possibilities here, now that we have access to clean, cheap solar energy and the batteries to store it also getting cheaper and cheaper, it's remarkable. And the place that's learned the lesson from California is Texas, which is now installing this stuff even faster than the Golden State.
What is it that's caused these panels to come down so fast? What is the main driver of the cheaper solar
Human
panel?
intelligence, human intelligence. This is not like oil or gas or coal, which are essentially commodities. Um, when you're buying a solar panel, what you're basically buying is human intelligence that informs it. And this, we get better and better and better and better at this. There's a very steep learning curve. The price keeps dropping. At the moment, every time we double the amount of solar on the planet, the price drops by about another half. And there seems to be no end in sight to that trend. Um, and it's just that some point earlier this decade, that crossed an invisible line where it became cheaper than burning coal and gas and oil. We live on a planet where the cheapest way to make power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. That's an amazing miracle. It's a miracle that hasn't sunk in yet, I think, in most of our heads, because we're so used to thinking about this stuff as alternative energy. That's the kind of ghetto we've put it in our minds. In food terms, we think of it as like the whole foods of energy, nice but pricey. But
And we also look at like PG&E, which is our big,
Mhm.
monopoly. We look at them as, kind of with angst and anger, but
Yeah,
that we have no choice but to use them, right? And that
right.
we have to wait till they hook us back up when there's a storm. So we're very much beholden to this
Increasingly,
giant corporation.
So increasingly, people are figuring out how to be much less beholden. That's what the solar panels on your roof and the battery in your basement do. Um, and that's, That's why places like PG&E are going to have to come to terms with this, because if they don't, it's only a matter of time before a lot of people opt out altogether and just go off grid. That's how good the technology and how cheap it's getting. But it would be much easier to do this, and this will be one of the focuses of Sunday, if it was easier to get this stuff up on your roof. We have a bizarre and Byzantine permitting system in this country that often means it takes months between your decision to put solar panels on the roof and actually hooking them up and connecting them to the utility. In a place like Australia or the EU, that takes not months, but days. I mean, you can order solar panels on Monday and by Friday have them churning power out on your roof, largely because they've figured out how to do this kind of automated permitting system. And happily, there's not like it's produced a spate of rooftop solar fires across Australia. It's a safe technology. It shouldn't be harder than putting a new refrigerator in your kitchen. Um, but we have to push hard to make that happen. California has actually passed a law mandating that communities use sort of instant permitting, a series of apps that allow contractors to get an instant permit, but it takes a while for communities to roll that out. Sunday, one of our tasks is to speed that up.
That's a great idea. I thought your discussion about the economics of solar was fascinating because you kind of tried to answer the question, why is China the one leading all of this? Because solar, the other forms of energy like petro energy yields profits because it costs less in one sense to pull it out of the ground, and then you sell it for higher, and then you sell it again when you refine it as gasoline. But in this case, solar doesn't like give you massive immediate profits. So the investment of China is interesting because their government can kind of overlook that. But in our country, it seems like there isn't a lot of investment because there's not a lot of return. And that's the old capitalist system, counting it in quarterly increments, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this and maybe demystify
Yes.
how the investment part of this works? Does it
So
have to be public?
the CEO of Exxon said last year, we're never going to invest in renewables because they don't offer, as he put it, above average returns for investors. And that's true. If you think about it, the reason that the oil companies don't like renewable energy is because their business model has been to get all of us to write a check every month, or every trip to the filling station, whatever, for a new tank of oil. But the sun delivers energy for free once you've set up the panels. That's good for everybody who doesn't own a coal mine or an oil well or whatever. The problem is getting that initial investment to get the solar panels up. That's why Joe Biden did this big IRA program that was designed to do that over the next decade. It's now been cut off by the Republican Congress. The tax credits will expire at the end of the year, and that is going to slow down that process here. But I think it won't stop it, or even close to stopping it, just because, as I say, the economics get better with each passing month. And though Exxon et al. Can do a lot to control our national political system with the cash they have, they can't really control that. Eventually, people are going to start noticing that other countries are able to produce their energy more cheaply, and that's going to give them a huge comparative advantage in everything going forward. It's as if we're taxing ourselves by not allowing the spread of this clean energy to happen. As a patriot, it makes me exceptionally annoyed. The solar cell was invented in the US, so was the lithium ion battery, and now we're just handing them over to Beijing. It's you could say they're eating our lunch, but it would be more accurate to say we've set a red-capped crew of waiters over to China to serve the lunch up for them. We couldn't be doing anything to make life easier for Xi Jinping than what we're doing here.
want to talk about a couple more things before I let you go. One is, objections to solar by people who claim to be environmentalists. They're worried about mining, that there's more uh, national sacrifice zones because we're mining lithium or other rare earth minerals. And then, there's also objections because of, do we have enough land for
Yes.
all of these glass panels? So let's take those two
Those are
objections
both-
and look at them and how you dealt with them in your book.
Those were both things that interested me a lot going in, because I am an environmentalist. Um, so yeah, there's no free lunch. There's just less expensive and more expensive lunches. We do have to go mine some lithium. But if you think about that for a minute, you quickly figure out why that's different. You mine some lithium, you put it in a battery, there it rests for a quarter century doing its work. Uh, when the battery itself degrades, you can actually, and we actually now do, recycle that lithium and just start all over again. If you go mine some coal, you set it on fire and have to go mine some more coal tomorrow. That's why the Rocky Mountain Institute estimated last fall that you'd get all the minerals that you needed for the energy transition by 2050 with about the same volume of mining as we used for coal last year.
Hmm.
Um, um, so yes, we should try to make mining as safe and environmentally sound as possible, but we should rejoice in the fact that we're figuring out ways to do over time less of it. A way to think of this in your mind is a shipload full of solar panels sent to the US, say, will over its lifetime produce about 500 times as much energy as that same shipload full of coal would. That gives you some just sense of the change here.
Yes, absolutely.
As for land use, we already use an enormous amount of land for oil and gas and coal. Mark Jacobson at Stanford says probably the footprint won't increase much as we're using sun and wind instead. But what's different is this footprint is much more benign. Um, you know, um, if you put up solar panels in a farm field, say, one of the things you're doing is taking what's currently a biological desert, often the cornfield in the US, and that's our biggest crop, is sprayed within an inch of its life. You're replacing that with a field where large parts in between the rows are now possible for all kinds of interesting experiments. This field of agrivoltaics is growing very fast because people are finding that in an overheated world, shade is a welcome commodity of interest to good Californians. There was a series of studies in the last 6 months from France showing that the yield of wine grapes was up as much as 60% in fields with solar panels because they're providing some shade and retaining some moisture in those places. In Vermont, where I live, we're increasingly interplanting the rows of solar panels with pollinator-friendly native plantings that are bringing in huge numbers of native insects. And in return, the surrounding farmers in their orchards and things are saying that fruit set is up 30 or 40%. So there are lots and lots of interesting ways to use these technologies to take us away from the heavy, huge scale monoculture, industrial agriculture that we're using at the moment. We need clean electrons. It's a perfectly good use of land to grow that crop.
I'm speaking with Bill McKibben, and his new book, Here Comes the Sun, extols the virtues of solar energy for our future. You say a lot of liberals don't like solar panels because of the way they look. And also, wind has become, a battle between NIMBYs and YIMBYs. Is there also a change that you'd like to see in the attitude of people who are looking at these things and saying they'd rather look at a cornfield than a solar panel?
So some of it's just education of the kind I've been doing to help them understand that cornfield is less pristine and this is more interesting. But part of it is just I just wrote a long piece for Mother Jones saying, time for, people like me, old white people, to stop suing because there's something they don't like the look of. We're in an emergency. Our kids and grandkids are going to have to deal with the world that we're leaving them. Anything we can do to speed up the transition and lower the temperature is a great gift to them. And it's entirely selfish to just keep saying, I don't want to look at a solar panel. Uh, Change your aesthetic a little bit and understand it as a kind of beautiful, deep connection between human beings and our local star, which already gives us warmth and light and photosynthesis, and now is willing to provide us with all the power we could ever want.
What a beautiful sentiment. I really appreciate this book. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to say in closing?
No, just that I'm looking forward to seeing pictures from all around the country on September 21st. Go to sunday.earth and figure out how to take part in this big festival.
Fantastic. Bill McKibben, I thank you for your book. I thank you for your time and all of the things you've done over the years to raise awareness about climate change. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. What a pleasure to talk, Rachel, and good luck going forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
instrumentation.